Life of the Brand. I'm Tyler McKnight. We have a very special show for everybody today. We have some faculty and students from Texas Tech University here to talk about a study abroad program with media, tourism, and photography that is also going to be coming up very soon. So they want to inform some people and tell some stories and really get us involved. So first I want to introduce Jerod Foster. Jerod Foster is an associate professor of practice and assistant dean in the College of Media and Communication at Texas Tech University, where he teaches courses in photography, visual storytelling, and immersive media production. He's also an editorial and commercial photographer and works with organizations such as the Nature Conservancy, Texas Highways Magazine, Texas Parks and Wildlife, and of course, the New York Times. Next we got Rob. Rob Peaslee is associate professor and chair in the Department of Journalism and Electronic Media at Texas Tech, where he studies relationships between pop culture, fandom, and tourism. So he's going to have a lot to talk about that. And then Socorra Austin. She is a senior at Tech. She's also pursuing a degree in electronic media and communication, and she is an alumni of the study abroad program. Mm-hmm. So basically how we want to start is I'll just let Rob go ahead and tell us a little bit about the program and what your background is in it, how long it's been around, some little fun facts about it, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So the program really kind of came initially out of my dissertation research, which took place in New Zealand in about 2005 and 6. And the reason I did it in New Zealand is I was interested in tourism related to the Lord of the Rings films. So I spent about 2 months in a little town called Matamata in New Zealand, which is where they built the Hobbiton village, and did field work there. And about probably 2 years after I arrived here in 2008, people in the college approached me and said, you should develop a study abroad program about that. And eventually I was convinced that they would say yes if I did. So so I started working with Jerod because I thought there'd be some value added in not only taking students down to New Zealand and to think about things like tourism and nation branding and so forth, but to actually also incorporate a practical element into the course. So we developed a program where essentially I do a lot of the conceptual teaching about some of the terminology and some of the ideas behind tourism and tourism related to media. And then Jerod's course kind of takes the more portfolio, practical approach where students are, while they're learning about these things and while we're kind of going through this tourism itinerary, they're also shooting and being treated essentially like professional photographers on assignment.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I taught a couple classes like it before. I teach one here in the States that's a 15-day field intensive course. It's mostly about portfolio building and building visual acuity while we travel across Texas. And I taught a travel photography course in Spain in 2011. And so when did we start doing these?
Summer of 14 was the first one.
Yeah, so just a few years before, I taught a similar course in Spain. And the nice thing about the photography course is that you can kind of put it anywhere. And we've frequently stated that these two classes are a perfect wedding together because of again, that front-loading conceptual content and then this practical professional charge that the students get while they're on assignment.
Yeah, that tension between theory and practice is constant in a lot of fields, but in our field in particular. Yeah. So it's really nice to be able to put them into that kind of close proximity and have them really work well together. So yeah, we started out in New Zealand. We did 2 years in New Zealand, and then we imported the program for the first time to another context in 2016, which was Scotland and Northern Ireland. We went back to New Zealand last summer, and we're headed to Scotland and Northern Ireland again this summer.
What was the reason behind switching it over to Northern Ireland and Scotland?
I think some of it was just to change it up a little bit and offer another opportunity and experience for the students. Yeah. We'd both spent some time in the UK, and in 2011, after I got through teaching in Spain, I went over to Scotland, mostly because I was always interested, familial reasons, but I also spent some time there writing, and I always thought it was neat, and we just kind of tossed around the idea of taking the program to a different country, and I think we always do talk about that. And so Scotland, we started kind of conceptualizing, what media is really popular in Scotland or in the area. And, of course, at the time, Game of Thrones is starting to burn it up. So
Game of Thrones, gotcha.
Yeah, so we said Scotland, and a lot of that came out of his trip, where he said, I had this experience there, and there's a lot of things we could do there that we do in New Zealand. And I hadn't been to Scotland for about 20 years at that point, so I was kind of on board. And a lot of stuff has been shot in Scotland, and for a long time, the most famous thing was Braveheart, and there was a huge tourism industry around Braveheart for a long time. And then I guess maybe 3 years ago now, they started shooting a program there called Outlander, which appears on Stars, and which sort of takes place, at least in the initial seasons, during sort of the height of the Highlander era in Scotland. So those were two kind of core texts that we looked at as possible anchors for Scotland. And then as we looked at it, we sort of, our eyes drifted west over to Northern Ireland, and we're like, we could get over to Belfast easy and spend a week or so there, where Game of Thrones was really just starting to, at that point, just starting to kind of blow up, and the tourism that resulted from Game of Thrones was really starting to ramp up as well.
So as far as the tourism goes, I mean, how much of the pop culture goes behind the reason being out there? And I know you're, from a photography standpoint, you're very much into the sociological viewpoint of fandom and cult followings. How do you put those together and still offer a very unique trip and a very authentic trip? Because this is something that people see on TV every day, and they obviously, if they see it all the time, they're going to find some relatability to it. And once they're out there, I'm sure it looks very different. I mean, I've been to Estes Park, and I've seen the Stanley Hotel, and there's a Chick-fil-A right outside of it, and you don't get that same feel that you get in The Shining. So share a little bit about that.
Well, I think, you used the word authenticity. I think that word is right there at the center of the course every time we teach it, and both courses, really. I mean, I think it's something that you're aiming for as a photographer. I'm sure it's elusive from a practitioner's point of view. It's as elusive theoretically. It's as elusive from a branding point of view. To try to capture that. Who can define authenticity? It's different from every individual's point of view. Some define authenticity in terms of a place looking like they thought it should look.
Right.
Others define it as being sort of free from tourist trappings. It's sort of it's real, which is, as we talk about in the course, a very difficult thing to pin down.
Well, and let's go ahead and talk about the course a little bit and your experience in there, and you Rob and Jerod can talk about all the cool things you did, but go ahead and share a little bit about your experience and kind of touch on a little bit what they've discussed a little bit.
Yeah, so the first, I think, week we had a few classroom sessions, and we did a few readings on this idea of authenticity, and I think that's kind of what staged, I guess, or started the whole trip, kind of set the tone, and we started learning about staging, and is it really authentic, or was it just staged to really look like what tourists want to see? And so the whole time you're doing this, you're thinking, okay, is it authentic? And it even applies, I think, to the photography side of it. A viewer, and when they're looking at a picture, they want to know, have the feeling that it's authentic, it's in the moment. And so while you're going through, you're also thinking about all these things and about capturing a shot that has what you want in it. And when we're at these tourist destinations, there's just 1,000 tourists, but you want the thing that everyone is there for.
Yeah, you don't want the tourists.
Yeah, you don't want the tourists in the shot that all the tourists want to go see. So anyway, it was really interesting. The whole time you're kind of second guessing what you thought about Scotland beforehand. And Peaslee, the way he set up the readings and all the things we did, it really set us up to kind of see Scotland with a new view. And even just I feel like with the photography side of it, I had just had the question the whole time, who am I as a photographer? And so anyway, it was just like you saw Scotland with a whole new look at it, because, I don't know, you're trying to develop your creative eye, you're going on walks to see, where is the best authentic place? And also, how am I going to capture that as a photographer?
Well, and I was just thinking about this as you were talking, and a lot of things are Americanized because we are the ones that the majority of media is targeted towards, and I may be a little biased in that because I live here, but when I think of Chinese food, it's Americanized, and then you talk to people that have been to China, they said it's the worst food they've ever had, and it's one of my favorite cuisines, and you can kind of relate that to your viewpoint of Scotland or Ireland, maybe, of you go in there with this Americanized thought of what those countries are, and then you get there and it's nothing what you expect. I mean, did you go in there with an expectation of this is what I'm going to see, this is what it's going to be like, and then come back with a completely different point of view on it?
I'm not sure. I had spent 2 weeks prior in London, and so when I got to Scotland, I had taken 2 courses with another study abroad group, and so by the time I got to Scotland, I was just excited, really. And then when we started visiting all these places, I guess I was surprised. I knew there was castles everywhere, and the first town we went to was Edinburgh, and there was a castle in the middle of the city. So everywhere you were, you would look up to the mountain, and there would be the castle, like in the. Anyway, it was so interesting.
But you could be standing next to a Burger King and look at the,
and you'll just look up and there's castle.
But all you have to do is focus the lens on that castle, and nobody will ever know that Burger King's there. Yeah. Do you think that's fair to exclude those things? It's almost like airbrushing a model on the cover of a magazine. I mean, how do you see that? It's not really exclusion or omission, but
selection.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you look at National Geographic, you could see a snow leopard, but it turns out that snow leopard's eating food off a picnic table to a rest stop.
Yeah, I think there's always a tension in tourism and travel between, what's real and what's imagined, what's packaged and what's sort of raw. I think most students who go to New Zealand or go to Scotland do get some version of what they imagine in their head, right? And we want them to have that because it would be really, really disappointing to not get that. I mean, that's part of what tourism is fulfilling a desire that is created through media, right? How else do we know about these places in order to visit them but through media? But our goal, I think, is to also give students the tools and the terminology to kind of peel that curtain back a little bit and be critical participants in that,
right?
Because we think that's going to make them better image producers as well, because they can maybe tell a story that isn't the same old story,
right? And from your standpoint, I know you're the photographer. How do you encourage students to go out there and try something bold and different? Because everybody's there to see the same thing, and it's hard to put your own little spin on something that is unique, but at the same time, it's not, because that's what everybody wants. So, what? I
think one of the things that I don't know if I stress it so much literally, but hopefully I stress in example and practices. Imagine what it's like to actually be living there. I think one of the things that's really attractive about a lot of tourism and travel photography is this sense of authenticity of what it's like. Well, what it's like is authentically really what it's like for somebody that does actually live there. And what that does, it doesn't discourage the student from getting the whiz-bang wow, the sexy shot that you need of the castle in your portfolio, but also to turn that lens away from the castle so much and maybe focus on life there. I think it encourages the students to appreciate something different, but also for them in training their perspective and training basically what they actually see and what they value as interesting. It can be something completely different than just the castle or just the Highland cattle or something like that.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say that's something that you did really
so
well.
For my photo essay, because I lived in Hawaii for a brief amount of time, and you get used to it. You get so used to where you are, and there's these tourists that are so amazed by all they're seeing. So I did my photo essay while we were there on the locals, really, and capturing them in this environment that we think is so amazing. And they're just going about their daily lives. This is how they walk down past the Edinburgh Castle every day to go to work. And what he also stresses is what people enjoy seeing in a photo is people. It brings you into the picture. And so, so that all of us were looking, we want pictures of people. So the whole time we're there, we're kind of people watching. You're trying to capture an authentic moment. And that's how I think everything ended up being so, how I felt I captured authenticity, and also how I felt Scotland is the people in it, So then where's the authenticity? It's the locals. The locals is where hopefully it's authentic. And so I think that's where I kind of focused my my photo essay, and then also your final project.
Was there a lot of interaction with the locals there? I know from being somebody that's lived in some metropolitan cities, and there's tourists everywhere, and I avoid them. I mean, I lived in New York City and went to Times Square once and never went back again. Is there some disdain from the locals with all those tourists there? Because really if there's a castle, that is the drawing point to that. And then when people aren't at the castle, it's almost abandoned. And what did the locals? How did they interact with you guys? Were they welcoming? Were they?
I mean, I think the Scots and Irish are great people, and they're welcoming and hospitable in their own way. But I would say, it's probably more obvious that they're a little over the tourist thing than maybe New Zealand, and that may just be because
particularly in Scotland.
Yes, yeah, in Scotland, because of the longevity of tourism to that one place.
Yeah,
they're just almost complacent about the fact that there's a tourist there, and and like you said, they'd probably rather avoid that milieu of people than be there.
And it's not even so much that they don't like tourists. It's like everything that tourism does to interfere with their regular day.
Yeah.
It's traffic, it's prices being more expensive near tourist locations. It's all the stuff that I'm sure you're thinking about when you're in New York City. That you're trying to avoid. I mean, that's another central tension of this whole industry of tourism is we want to attract people to come here. It's good for the economy. We want to treat them well, but we are also kind of tired of them. Or eventually there's going to be some blowback on that from your local population.
Well, and something we can actually look at is how many people have the idea of what tourism actually, the commercialized view of tourism. I know in my head, growing up, you picture somebody in flip-flops and socks, fanny pack, hat, sunscreen on the nose. Yeah. And, they called, I don't know if you guys remember the show Rocket Power, they called them shoebies. Yeah. All these kids that walked on the beach with their shoes and they weren't locals. I don't know if that's really what tourism is. It has so many negative connotations to it, and I've kind of grown up to where when I go to a place, I don't want to appear as if I'm a tourist. I want to feel like I'm a local. That's tourism for me. Is I go and I rent a house. I don't go and stay in a hotel. I go and do all the things that the locals do. I don't go to the big hot spots. I don't go see the Mona Lisa. And maybe that's just me trying to be a hipster and not mainstream, but I feel like that's the way tourism has kind of gone, is that people are looking more for these authentic feels, and because of people like you guys, you can go out there and shoot it and show them what the real authentic part is. It's not just the Tower of London or Buckingham Palace or the things that people know were there.
And I think that self-awareness is a big deal, especially now in this kind of era of tourism, especially American tourism. But I think it goes both ways too, though, because a lot of tourists may not necessarily feel that they can engage the locals.
Sure.
And that's probably the hardest thing to do, especially for students, and especially for students that it's their first time out of the country, their first time to a truly foreign place.
Right.
Even though everybody speaks the same language, we all say the same words. Yeah. Maybe articulate them a little bit differently, but I think that social barrier is tough anyways anywhere. But when you go to a different country, it's like, I'm now the foreigner in this country. It's awesome being here, but if you came back and I asked you how was it, how were the people, you may not have much to say about them because you didn't engage them.
They were there.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. So I just kind of want to take a lighthearted look at it now. If you guys want to share some favorite stories and some cool happenings that happened out there, and we can get away from the philosophical stuff for a little bit and talk about the experiences. You want to start, Socorra?
Yeah, you should start.
Okay. I've been debating on what to talk about. There's so many things that happened. I mean, we were there for a month, so it's so awesome, all the experiences we get to experience. I really enjoyed what Foster told us kind of at the beginning. He challenged us to kind of go on a walkabout, like on our own, or at least like take a partner with us and kind of figure out, buddy system, figure out like your own creative eye and like your own pace of photography. So a few times I feel like those were the most memorable moments, and that was when I felt like my favorite photographic pieces were taken. And in Inverness, we were somewhere in Scotland near Inverness, and I had like mapped out where the water would be because I figured that would be really pretty, and just went we walked around, and it was so awesome. I got to go through this wildlife preserve, and there was swans in this lake, and anyway, it was just like it was actually being there and kind of being away from the crowd of 20 peers where everyone's just staring at you because there's like 20 tourists walking by, and I think those were the most memorable moments. Was just kind of taking it in a small setting and just finding your creative eye was one of my favorite points.
And we push that hard. I mean, we realize we have the group, we love the group, we love being with the group and going to these places, but we really stress breaking away from the group, like I said, as pairs or as smaller groups, because I mean that's just when things start to really open up for you.
Right.
You don't get the same shot that everybody got, and you're not almost entranced to point your camera the same way. At that point, when you're just on walkabout, anything goes. And I think I can't speak for Rob, but I think my favorite moments are very similar. Rob and I approach traveling to these places in a little bit different way because we know we'll probably be back with another group, and so we're actually exploring anytime that they have time away from the group. Well, we do too, and so we're always exploring. We this nice little restaurant in Dundee, which is not a hot tourist spot at all in Scotland, but it's a university town right across this rather long bridge, and I can't remember the name of the river.
The River Tay.
Is the River Tay that crosses right before it opens out into the ocean there, or the channel. There's a little restaurant on the other side, and we went there twice.
We walked that bridge twice.
Yeah. I mean, this is a pretty expansive bridge.
It's a mile.
Yeah. But just getting there, those little neat finds that we make together, hiking the Kerrang, it influences what we're going to do next time over there. And sometimes next time with the students, like we're going to hike the Kerrang with the students this year. The Kerrang was by far, my favorite part of the trip, and it was just me and Rob. It wasn't with the whole group. But there are great, that's really valuable. It's not only valuable to the students, but for us as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really like about the program, in addition to sort of the academic side of it, is that, and this is true of a lot of the stuff that Jerod does domestically, a lot of the things we do also push students to get beyond their boundaries in a number of ways. And I think that's one of the most valuable things that education can do, certainly that study abroad can do. And some of that is about like fighting what Jerod calls nature deficit disorder, and getting people outside and getting people active.
Right.
So we've done mountain biking with students. We've done a lot of hikes with students. And the last time we did this trip, one of the things that we're going to do again this year is do a summit hike of Ben Nevis, which is the highest peak in the United Kingdom.
Wow. Okay.
And when we did that, the last time we were there, one of the students on our trip, let's just say that hiking a mountain was probably not like in her wheelhouse. But she was committed to doing it, and it's a substantial hike. I mean, it's an all day up and down.
Yep.
And seeing her hit the top of that mountain was pretty great. And moments like that are what I think for both of us it's really all about, is like putting students in places where they don't necessarily feel 100% comfortable.
Right.
But recognizing that that's productive, and that's where real transformative experiences come from.
And as I listen to you guys talk, something popped in my head that, do you ever find yourselves being a student to your own cause? I mean, you go out there, I'm sure you guys learned a ton. And,
Sure.
I know you're there for the kids, but I'm sure you guys are learning just as much as they are. And I'm sure you have those profound experiences.
Yeah. We have a saying, like, you're always going to learn more than the students, because you're having to teach and consult and guide at the same time. So I mean, it's almost exhausting, I think, how tuned in everybody is, but maybe more so for us, because it's almost like we're always on alert.
It's hard to, it's easy to get caught up in like the fun and the romance of international travel and all the things that we do, but at the end of the day, we're also in a foreign country with 20 or 22 or 24 undergrad students, and we're responsible for that. And so we can't, we can never lose sight of that. And we've been really fortunate, 99.9% of the time, that we've had great students on the trip and basically no issues. Yeah. So
one of my favorite moments from the last iteration that went to Scotland and Northern Ireland was when we were in Belfast. Belfast is an amazing city. I think all of us would say that it's pretty.
It's rich.
It's awesome. Yeah,
it's badass.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much cultural value there. Yeah, but when we took that short walk to the falls, one of the roads that basically iconically defined the terroristic activity that happened in that particular area not too long ago. This fight for freedom of choice, basically, on who you belong to in Ireland or Northern Ireland or the UK. That was pretty eye-opening, I think. And again, it wasn't like climbing a mountain, but it was still kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
In very real ways, as we're walking through this neighborhood, and these murals are depicting these, depending on what side you were on, atrocities that happened in that particular area. Again, not too long ago.
When you made an interesting comment about that the other day, which side is the right side? I mean, you find yourself thinking, am I on the bad side or the good side, or does it matter?
Because you're an American,
right. You're on the bad side.
Are you
no matter
supposed
where
to
you
have
are.
an opinion in that regard, especially when you're on the ground there?
Right.
Well, and it's really unusual to be in a touristic or a tourism, sort of scenario, and to be made to feel at all uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one of tourism in some ways is about putting people in situations that are perfectly safe, but feel out of the ordinary or a little bit risky, just enough to take them out of their comfort zone. But it's very rare that you actually suddenly have this awareness that you're in a place where, like, maybe you ought to be a little uncomfortable. Like, maybe things aren't 100% under control here, and I think students, and we sort of, felt that way. I don't think we were ever in any kind of danger or anything like that, but it was
the things you've seen on TV and the news, and it's hard to shake that feeling.
Yeah, you've been inundated with that so much. I'd like to take the group this year past the Europa Hotel, just so they see. We didn't intentionally walk by it. The last time we were there, I got on a bus right outside the Europa to go down to Dublin after our program ended, and I realized at that moment that was the Europa. That was the most bombed hotel in Europe. And it's still there, it's still operating as a high-end hotel, and it'd be neat to walk students by just to soak in that fact, and see what happens.
And as we talk about the history of Northern Ireland and the strife they went through, how has the new media, and I believe you mentioned Game of Thrones, the majority of it's filmed in Northern Ireland, how has tourism, media, and pop culture interacted with that country to rebrand it, so to speak, and turn it into a place of fun and joy and not fear,
Yeah, it's interesting. They are very much figuring that out right now. So one of the things we do in this program is we always set up a meeting with whether it's New Zealand or Scotland or Northern Ireland, with the sort of state organization that oversees tourism, national branding, basically getting people to come there. And when we met the last time with Tourism Northern Ireland, it was rich, in terms of the complexity of the thing that they're trying to pull off there right now. New Zealand did this, coming on 20 years ago now with Lord of the Rings, but New Zealand didn't have any real image problems at that point. I mean, they were known for ecotourism and probably the Maori, the indigenous culture.
But they're also a newer country in terms of infrastructure too. So I mean, all these facets.
Like they were primed. They, and that's one of the reasons why they're the most sort of viable case study on earth of film tourism. But Northern Ireland, they got some baggage, and recent baggage, and baggage that's very familiar to North American audiences, right? So they've got a pickle. About 80% of Game of Thrones is made in Northern Ireland, and there's an enormous demand for touristic activities and so forth there on the part mostly of American or North American tourists who want to see these locations, who want to sort of immerse themselves in the land of Westeros. And so there's a lot of stakeholders kind of jockeying for position there and trying to make the most of that. And it's kind of a gold rush mentality right now. So I think we're all interested to 2 years later, how much of that is settled down, how much of that has been kind of standardized, how much of that is still in flux, how has it matured essentially.
And we're scheduling a bit more time this year in Northern Ireland, largely in part because of that. You kind of take a longer peek at it.
Well, cool. I just want to talk a little bit about the unique opportunity that this program can provide to people. I know we touched on it a little bit, but give me some final thoughts on what this experience will really bring to you and how it's unique to any other study abroad programs that Tech may offer, or other universities.
Take
a stab.
Well, I came in as a freshman, so I was pretty much a blank slate. Like, I hadn't taken very many higher level classes. And I was just kind of learning photography at that point. I knew how to use a camera, but to really figure out who you are as your person was so interesting. And I feel like everything I learned on the trip applies, even though I'm not going into photography. I'm looking into web design and print design, but everything you're learning, like I said, about seeing a person in a photo changes how you feel about the photo. It makes you more interactive with it. And so when I'm picking stock photos for a website, I know what to choose from. I know what's going to be and like a photo that will make someone feel something or make them feel associated with this brand. And I think, and just the realization of authenticity and just thinking of that throughout your whole work has definitely shaped the last few years of my learning experience and knowing composition. At that point, this is some of the first creative work I had learned or had started doing. And all his critiques was, okay, your composition is good. It's kind of out of focus, could be a little bit more underexposed, or I don't know, anyway. And so my photographic skills weren't amazing compared to all the other students who were wanting to go in. Not all of them want to go into photography, but some of them were really good photographers. And learning what my strengths were versus my weaknesses really led me down the road of, okay, I like composition. I'm not entirely in love with photography. I like it, and it's amazing. I appreciate it so much. But learning, okay, I'm going to take this to print design. And I think everyone gets something out of that. You know, you find yourself, you find your strengths and weaknesses. When you're on this trip for a month, you're finding out a lot. So I really think that no matter what major or whatever, you really figure it out. Kind of who you want to be and where you're going.
Yeah, and that was something that I didn't really know much about this program, and my initial thought was this is only for photography and video students, but I mean it's for anybody who wants to go out and experience a country and take that experience into your career, and I thought that was a really cool message to tag along with it. But
we don't. There are some very simple prereqs, neither of which have anything to do with your photographic skill.
I'm in.
And that's good. I mean, we want students to come in at a variety of ability levels, and I think Jerod's philosophy is to take them where they are when they come in and move them forward in some significant way. I think that I'll let Jerod speak to the photographic elements of this, but watching him work with students in the field is a great thing. Watching students learn by watching him, by doing what he does, by getting up at 5 a.m. to catch the sunrise, staying up until midnight. Staying up till midnight to shoot the sky. You just can't do it in the classroom. You just can't. I mean, so being able to get that kind of hands-on, example-driven kind of learning is, I think, paramount in this program. I think for me, there's also maybe as profound or maybe a little more long-term, you don't necessarily realize right away that you're getting this benefit, but I think the benefit of just, study abroad generally is being in an unfamiliar place, in a way sort of conquering in that, having had that experience of being in a place that's unfamiliar, becoming familiar, learning about it, gaining confidence about operating in an unfamiliar context is really important. And then there's the stuff that we don't even plan that happens that helps students really sort of dial into a bigger world. The last time we did this program, it just so happened that right smack dab in the middle of our time there, the Brexit vote happened.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we were there for 2 weeks leading up to it and for 2 weeks after it.
Very cool.
And I think for a lot of our students it was like a living history lesson. And I'd love to say that we kind of planned that, but
right. Yeah. Well, it was really encouraging the morning after the vote happened. We'd all been tuned into it.
You couldn't avoid it.
You saw banners and stuff in support or against it. But the next morning, every student was down in the lobby eating breakfast, just glued to the TV, watching and learning because it affected their lives too, and in a different way, but it still affected them. And they were really interested because it related to all these other things we were talking about in some form or fashion. I think that's really cool. I think that's maybe the value in that may be unique to our program, or at least hopefully we can say that. is the interrelatability of what we do with the academics and the places that we visit.
Sure.
Our classes inform each other, and I think what that does is it helps people see a different place, a new place in a different way. It gives them that confidence, particularly whenever maybe their first experience in a different country is with hopefully two people that can clarify confusion or challenges or something like that. I think from a long-term outcome, that's what's really nice about study abroad for me and in this program in particular. And Socorra mentioned too that something I mentioned in classes at Tech. You may not want to go into photography, but both classes are designed this way to see how to apply these concepts and even these specific techniques abstractly across your professional career. I often talk about how a lot of people that actually go on this trip, they don't see themselves as full-time photographers post college, but they see themselves as people that probably need to be able to speak that language so they can work effectively with photographers and other visual creatives, whether they be print designers or web designers or whatever it may be. I think there's a lot of value in having that message driven home out of the classroom when you're in a new place, and you're more alert at that point. So yeah.
Well, I got a final question for you guys. It's kind of a fun one. So what countries do you think are on the short list for the future? Do you plan on going anywhere else? Do you know?
Yeah, we talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
We talk about Iceland.
Iceland, nice.
Quite a bit. And that's Game of Thrones driven, but there's also other popular media shot there as well. It's also facing a tourism issue, much like Northern Ireland. And how do we cope with this influx of tourism traffic? But and photographically, it's pretty hot too right now. But we talk about Iceland.
Yeah, they're drinking from a fire hose right now because they had more American tourists last year than they have Icelanders, and that's just American tourists.
Right.
And part of that is some of the media stuff like Game of Thrones, but they've also been really aggressive about courting it. Iceland Air was offering free overnights on cross Atlantic flights to Europe for American tourists. And they host a lot. Like Amazon does its annual meeting in Reykjavik because it's kind of east meets west right there. So they've been pretty aggressive about trying to entice people there. But now it's worked.
Yeah.
And it's a small country. There's not that many people there. There's not a lot of infrastructure.
Right.
For a transatlantic flight, it's pretty inexpensive to get there. I mean, it's.
So we're hoping to scout that, if not on this trip, soon, and maybe make that another sort of country in the rotation. There are others that we could certainly look at, but that one, just based on kind of the proximity and both in terms of the kind of content we're looking at and also geographic proximity, is probably the most likely next target.
Some of it may depend on what the next big media franchise is.
Right?
Yeah. What is the next big thing?
Westworld. See you guys on the moon.
Yeah, exactly.
But on that note, I just want to thank you guys for coming, and it's been really eye opening to listen to Socorra speak about the program and to people that are so passionate about it, and it goes beyond education. It's a life experience. So I just want to thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us.
This sounds amazing. I highly recommend it. I haven't been, but I would go if I could. And again, just thanks for coming in, and see you guys in the next semester.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.